Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're taking a trip to the Stargate universe. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the very interesting case of Dr. Daniel Jackson and his, well, let's say, complicated relationship with death.
Complicated is a good word for it.
We've got this really thought-provoking podcast episode as our source material, and it really gets into how Daniel's, his tendency to die and come back, it's more than just a sci-fi gimmick.
Oh, absolutely. It's woven into the very fabric of his character. In fact, the source material highlights how cyclical it all is. It's not just random bad luck that keeps befalling him.
Right. It's almost like a ritual or a test he has to go through over and over again.
Exactly. Now, to understand this, we need to start with who Daniel is at his core.
Yeah, the source material describes him as this brilliant archaeologist and linguist.
Okay.
Huge heart, always searching for the truth.
And I think it's those core traits that make this whole death and return pattern so fascinating. Okay, I see where you're going with this. So, is the source material saying that his very curiosity, his desire to uncover the truth, is what keeps leading him into these life or death situations?
It definitely plays a role.
Yeah.
It's like he can't resist venturing into the unknown, even if it means putting himself in danger. And it's interesting how early this pattern is established. Remember his first death, way back in season 1, shot down by Apophis.
Oh man, that was rough. It felt like the show was over before it even began.
Right. But instead of being the end, it was just the beginning of this ongoing exploration of mortality that defines so much of Daniel's story.
Yeah, it's like the writers were sending us a message like, hey, death is going to be a recurring theme here. Buckle up.
Exactly. And then you've got his encounter with Oma Dasala in season 3.
That powerful ancient being, right?
Yes. The podcast guest makes this really interesting argument. They say that meeting wasn't just foreshadowing Daniel's eventual ascension.
Oh, interesting.
It was hinting at this deeper connection he's always had to something bigger, something beyond the normal human experience of life and death. Like he was always meant for something more.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Like his human life was just one small part of a much grander cosmic journey.
Okay, so with that in mind, how do we interpret his death in Meridian, season 5?
Oh, Meridian. Man, that one was a gut punch.
Right. It's not your typical action movie death. It carries real emotional weight. Daniel, knowing he's absorbing a lethal dose of radiation to save an entire civilization. Talk about a hero's sacrifice.
But here's the thing. The source material argues that Meridian is pivotal because it changes what death means for Daniel. This isn't just him dying. It's a transformation.
Because he ascends, right? He becomes a being of pure energy.
Exactly. It's about evolution, reaching a whole new level of being.
Wow. I never thought about it that way before. But, okay, this is what I've always wondered. How do you write for a character who can literally come back from the dead?
Right. It's a challenge. The podcast episode points out that Daniel's ascension opened up all these new possibilities for the show.
It's not just sci-fi adventure anymore.
It starts dipping its toes into philosophy, making us wrestle with these big questions about the nature of existence, about what might lie beyond our physical reality.
Whoa, so deep.
Right. It's like the writers were given permission to get really heady.
I mean, let's be real, most sci-fi shows wouldn't even touch those kinds of topics.
Yeah, you're right. And his time as an ascended being, that's crucial to understanding his overall journey, wouldn't you say?
Totally.
I mean, think about it. He gets to see the universe from a totally different perspective. He interacts with other ascended beings. He can even influence events in the physical world.
But he's still bound by those ancient rules.
Those cosmic rules.
Yeah.
The source material actually uses the word bureaucracy, which I found fascinating.
Bureaucracy, that's a weird word to use for like a group of super powerful beings.
I know, right? But it creates this tension for Daniel. He has all this knowledge, this power, but he's limited in how he can use it.
Yeah, it's got to be frustrating. And isn't that where we see the start of his darker side? Like the podcast episode touches on that a little.
Absolutely. The source material suggests this period of ascension isn't just about Daniel gaining wisdom. It's also about confronting the limitations of his power.
So all that time observing the universe, seeing things he can't change, that really takes its toll on him.
For sure. He's essentially getting a crash course in the complexities of good and evil.
Yeah, the messy reality of trying to do the right thing when you're stuck following rules you don't fully understand.
And then, boom, he's back in human form in season 7, and he's lost all his memories. It's like the writers hit the reset button. but with a twist.
Because even though his memories are gone, he's not the same Daniel who ascended, right?
That's the point the podcast is making.
Right.
Each death, each return, it subtly changes him.
So it's not just these big dramatic deaths.
Right. It's the cumulative effect of constantly facing mortality, of being ripped from one reality and thrown back into another.
Wow. Heavy stuff.
The source material uses the term psychological scarring, which I thought was a powerful way to describe it. It's like he's constantly building up these layers of experience, of trauma even. And, it's interesting how that plays out in later seasons.
Yeah, like in season 9 when he's trapped on that crashed spaceship with Vela and it seems like he's going to die again. It feels almost like the writers are playing with us at that point.
I know what you mean. Like, we're all in on the joke.
Yeah, because we know he's died and come back before, so there's this constant tension. Is this it? Is he really gone this time?
The podcast guest makes a good point, though. They say, even though we might laugh about it now, all those close calls still add to this sense that he's living on borrowed time, that he's always pushing the limits of what it means to be human.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like he's become this walking paradox.
Mm-hmm.
A mortal man who's experienced immortality. A scholar who's constantly forced to confront the limits of his knowledge.
And by the end of the series, it's clear that all these deaths, all these resurrections, they've transformed him into something more than just a regular sci-fi hero.
He's become almost like a modern-day myth. He's become a figure who embodies this cycle of death and rebirth, constantly pushing the boundaries of life and death. Almost mythic, really.
That's a great way to put it. And the source material actually dives into that, drawing parallels to figures like Osiris from Egyptian mythology, or even Jesus in Christian tradition.
Exactly. They die, they're resurrected, and those experiences fundamentally change not only who they are, but also how they're perceived by everyone around them.
They transcend just being characters in a story.
They become symbols, embodying core human fears and hopes.
Hopes about mortality and the possibility of something more, you mean?
Precisely. And this death and rebirth motif that's woven through Daniel's story, I think that's what makes it resonate on such a deep level.
It taps into those universal anxieties we all have about death, but it also offers this glimmer of hope, It suggests that maybe death isn't the end. Right. Maybe there's something more. And that reminds me, the source material makes this point about how Daniel's journey gives us permission to explore these big existential questions.
It's like we're right there with him, grappling with the nature of life and death and what might lie beyond.
Heady stuff.
Yeah.
But it's presented in such a compelling way. And I think that contrast between this heavy philosophical exploration and Daniel's initial personality, that's part of what makes it so effective.
Oh, totally. Because remember, he starts off as this idealistic, almost naive character.
Right. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
But with each death, each return, he becomes a little more introspective, a little more world-weary.
You can see the weight of his experiences, the knowledge of death, and the mysteries beyond, slowly chipping away at his idealism.
Makes you wonder, if we went through what he did, how would we change?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the source material describes this as a paradoxical transformation.
Paradoxical.
Yeah, because he becomes both more cynical and more compassionate.
So he's more aware of the darkness, but also more determined to find the light.
Exactly. He's almost like a walking contradiction. But it feels so real, so human.
And I think that's why he's so relatable, Because he's not this invincible superhero. He's flawed, vulnerable. He gets knocked down, but he always finds a way to get back up.
And that vulnerability, that acceptance of his own mortality, it makes him even more endearing.
It's funny, right? You'd think a character who dies all the time would become detached, less relatable.
Right, but with Daniel, it's the opposite.
It's like his willingness to face death head on, to embrace the unknown. It makes him more human, more real.
It's like each encounter with death strips away the pretense, the illusion. And what we're left with is this raw, unfiltered humanity that's both inspiring and heartbreaking.
Beautifully said. It's like he's constantly forced to confront the fragility of life, how precious each moment really is.
And that, in turn, makes him appreciate those small things, the connections he forms, the beauty he finds in the world around him.
It's like he's constantly being reminded that life is a gift, even when it throws him a curveball like, dying. And I think that's what makes his story so powerful, so universal.
It speaks to our shared human experience. You've got those anxieties about mortality, the longing for connection, the search for meaning in a world that can feel chaotic. It's all there.
Right. And it's all wrapped up in this sci-fi package with aliens and spaceships. But it's really about something much deeper. And the source material actually highlights how this focus on Daniel's inner journey is part of what elevates Stargate above so many other shows in the genre.
It's not just about saving the day. It's about exploring what it means to be human.
The complexities of life and death, and the potential for growth, even in the face of huge challenges.
And that brings us to a really important question. Why should we care about this?
Why should we care about a fictional character who keeps dying?
What does Daniel Jackson's story mean for us, the viewers, the fans? What does it mean for the people grappling with their own messy, complicated lives?
It's a great question. And I think the source material offers some really thought-provoking answers. It suggests that Daniel's journey gives us a different way to look at these big existential questions.
It invites us to confront our own mortality, to figure out what really matters to us, to embrace the unknown.
He shows us that even in the face of death, there's hope, there's possibility, there's renewal.
And maybe it even encourages us to ask ourselves, what if? What if we could experience death and come back? How would that change us?
It's kind of a mind-blowing concept, right? The source material even suggests that it might not be a one-time thing, you know? Maybe death and rebirth, maybe that's a cycle we all go through.
It's a fascinating idea, and it's been explored in different spiritual traditions for centuries, but actually trying to picture it from a personal perspective. How would that feel? How would it change us? That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah. The podcast guest made this point about how even just thinking about it can be transformative, you know? Like, it makes you confront your own mortality, your assumptions about life and death, and maybe it even makes you reconsider what really matters to you.
Absolutely. It's like holding a mirror up to your beliefs and your values. What if everything you thought you knew about death was wrong?
Right. How would that change the way you live your life?
It's unsettling, but in a good way, like you said. Kind of shakes things up, makes you think outside the box. And the source material suggests that that kind of questioning is actually at the heart of Daniel's whole journey.
It's like he's constantly forced to re-examine his beliefs, to adapt to new realities, and try to make sense of a universe that keeps throwing him curveballs.
Yeah, and it's through those challenges that he grows, he evolves, and in the end, he becomes something more. The podcast guest uses this great analogy. They compare Daniel to a piece of pottery being fired in a kiln.
Okay, I like this.
Each death is like another firing, making him stronger, more resilient, more able to hold the weight of everything he's learned.
That's such a powerful image, and it makes me think about how much we resist change. You know, we cling to our familiar routines and beliefs, even when they're not working for us anymore.
It's comfortable, right?
Yeah.
But maybe we should be more like Daniel, a little more willing to embrace the unknown, to let go of what we think we know, and open ourselves up to new possibilities.
That's a good point. It's like he's showing us that growth often comes from being uncomfortable, from stepping outside those comfort zones, from allowing ourselves to be transformed by what we go through. And sure, what he goes through is obviously extraordinary, but I think there's a universal message there that applies to everyone.
Absolutely. We all face our own challenges, our own deaths and rebirths in a way. And it's how we navigate those experiences that shapes who we become.
So we started this deep dive talking about Dr. Daniel Jackson and his many deaths, but we ended up someplace completely different.
It wasn't just about a character, was it? It was about all of us.
It was about life, death, and the incredible potential for transformation that exists within us all. And as we wrap up, I think that's the message I want to leave you with. You know, maybe this deep dive sparks something in you. Maybe you're looking at your own life, your own challenges, a little differently now.
And if that's the case, then we've done our job.
We set out to start a conversation, to get you thinking, to encourage you to look a little deeper into the mysteries of the universe and the human experience. So thank you for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.